The Ensombl Advice South Africa podcast is intended for professional financial advisors. All discussion is limited to publicly available information and should not be interpreted as legal, professional, or financial advice. Ensombl Advice is not a licensed financial services provider and does not provide financial services. Before making investment decisions, you should obtain financial advice from a qualified financial advisor.
Hi, I'm Louis van der Merwe, Certified Financial Planner. Join me every week where I get to have discussions with global leaders in the financial planning space to help you serve your clients better and run a more efficient financial planning practice. This is Financial Planners South Africa podcast.
Portfolio Metrics is thrilled to bring you this podcast in support of our common passion for people and the evolution of wealth management. Our global business links precision investment management to expert financial advice through partnerships and technology. Portfolio Metrics is an authorized financial services provider. ComSpace is a revenue management solution developed specifically for independent financial advisors. It is a web-based application that tracks, allocates, and manages advisor revenue. The system seamlessly reads commission statements from financial institutions and can address any permutation of commission splits. ComSpace provides mind-blowing, out-the-box revenue business intelligence and analytics, along with super flexible reporting to effectively manage and grow your business.
Welcome to another episode of Ensombl Advice South Africa. Today I have with me Rory Brachner. Rory, it's wonderful to have you here.
Thanks, Louis. You pronounce it perfectly, by the way.
Thank you. I had to practice that, and the Afrikaans genes are showing. Is that German?
It is actually a German origin. My father's Hungarian, but randomly we have a German surname. And so, there's a German background there somewhere in the family.
Wonderful. And, that might come through when we start talking about the precision in your technology offering. So for those listeners that are unfamiliar with Rory, he's the founder and MD at DoshGuide. Rory, this is a very unique offering, and I want us to unpack a little bit of what led to you creating DoshGuide, like where you saw a gap in the market. I know you often talk about product market fit, so I'm sure those words will pop up, but share with us how DoshGuide came about.
Sure. I mean, it's almost don't know where to start. I mean, there's been, loads of things that I've been involved with that have led up to this point where I'm now launched DoshGuide. I think, my first startup when I was in my 20s is actually has contributed to it, which is I started a tutoring company when I was in college, when I was in university, and it actually grew to have 250 tutors and 5 full-time staff. And I think one of the things that I took away from that was the incredible power of educating people, or taking somebody from a point of not really understanding something and not really feeling confident about something to a point where they get it. And time again, like I was tutoring high school kids in maths. And I mean, these were kids that were, really struggling and failing in maths. Their parents were freaked out. And there was not one kid that I didn't sit down and tutor and spend time and coach them through the parts that they were struggling, where they would have these miraculous turnarounds. And all it took was just somebody to coach them through it, somebody who understood and was a subject expert, just sort of take them through that. And so that was something that really left an impression on me, and I just absolutely loved that. I'd say that definitely has played a part.
Can I interrupt you
this.
there?
Yes.
Where was this? Were you in Cape Town?
This was in South Africa, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this was, I was based in Joburg. The company was called Higher Education. Terrible little play on words, which I've learned not to do for SEO reasons, if not others, since then. But this was something that I started when I was in university. Started hiring buddies and people around me, and by the end, after about sort of 5 years, I had 250 people. So that worked. That was a really inspiring part of this journey, and it was reflecting on it and thinking about where I've led to kind of made me think about that. And then I think the next part of the journey about what that led to it was, after I finished with that company, I went and worked at Google in London. And I ended up working at Google for about 9 years, started in London, moved to Singapore for about 4 years, and then was transferred to the mothership, which is San Francisco, for about 2 years. And that, I had various roles, but my main job was like a business development guy at Google. So we had these technology products, and I would go and basically be building these businesses in various parts of the world, either sort of Europe or Asia or the US. And it was, what I learned there is just the power of scaling, the power of technology, an interest and keen interest in these kind of marketplace businesses. My clients were like Airbnb or Uber or Booking.com. And so you can kind of see where some of these connections and some of the sort of inspiration coming from that background, coming from that technology background, led me towards this platform and this idea. And then I guess the final part of the story is the actual catalyst of me getting into launching this company was in 2021. I was kind of winding down my career at Google and looking for something else to do. And I basically quit, and I'd taken about a year off, and I was trying to figure out like what would be the next thing to do. And I remember, definitely the entrepreneur sort of startup bug was biting, because I remember that, even though it was challenging, I enjoyed that in my 20s, my first startup. And I was thinking it needs to be something scalable, something sort of technology orientated, something consumer facing, because I was sick of working with like B2B type of businesses. And I had this awful experience with a financial advisor, where I got sold a product that was, had like 4% fees. I'd put 5 years of monthly premiums into this product. And long story and many tears and many conversations later, I decided to surrender out of that product. I burned 25% of the money. And it was just a huge, very difficult, very impactful learning for me, just having wasted even the opportunity cost, 5 years later being 25% down instead of like maybe 40 or 50% up. I was just super angry and just disappointed in myself for not asking the right questions. And I ended up, that was, I'd say, the biggest catalyst. There were other factors involved, but that was the biggest catalyst for me thinking, okay, well, what is wrong with this situation? How is there a person that sold me that product? Why did that product even exist? What is this system that's created a place where someone like me who, I think I'm like relatively well informed, but I just didn't ask the right questions, and got basically suckered into buying a product that was just not fit for purpose, and just an awful product that enriched the provider versus really providing for my needs. And that was sort of 2021, and launched and got our first set of customers last year, and ongoing this year.
I want to pause a little bit about that experience that you've had, because this is a story that a lot of financial planners face.
Sure.
They probably meet a new client and they ask them sometimes, what has the experience been with working with someone in our profession or industry in the past? And time again, it ends up in a really bad experience. Like, do you think that just makes the conversation that much easier for the new financial planner, or are potential clients already on guard to say, I don't want to be taken for a ride again?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, definitely most of our clients have that background. A very typical call that I will have with a new client is, I've spoken to 5 advisors this year. It's like every single one of them, I can just see they're trying to sell me some product, or it just doesn't make sense, or the costs are just prohibitive, and it just doesn't feel right. Especially the younger clients, which is our target market. Our target market is sort of 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, like wealth builders in inverted commas. They haven't necessarily got a lot of liquid assets. And so that profile of client is also like young and relatively savvy, and can kind of just, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that actually this person, the incentives aren't quite aligned, So I guess, from our perspective, actually, a lot of our clients have had poor experiences. I think probably in some way it helps, for us to go, well, this is literally how it's different. And what we talk about is the incentives are the things that are causing that behavior to not be, going in the right place. It's misaligned incentives, basically, which are incentivizing advisors to push products or incentivizing advisors to collect assets. And neither of those are really suitable for sort of younger clients, where they don't necessarily have assets, but they still are really like keen and desperate sometimes for some great advice and could really benefit from it. So, and they can afford, a monthly premium. They pay for their gym, they pay for their medical aid. So, they pay for their DSTV subscription. So it's the same, it's trying to get them to think about it that way, really. Well, trying to get the market to think about it that way is where we get our clients. So yeah, I guess it kind of helps us, but I think also the other side of that, of your question is, maybe it will just put a lot of people off. And I think that's sort of unfortunate because, going back to my experience with my first startup, like it is so powerful to have somebody hand-holding you and coaching you on something that, you can't expect it to be an expert in. Not everybody's going to be an expert or even has any interest in, the financial industry landscape or financial product. So it's super valuable to have somebody to handhold you through that. Just like the same as you wouldn't operate on yourself, if you had some sort of medical condition, or you wouldn't prescribe your own drugs, that would be probably not the smartest thing, But we see a lot of people kind of doing that themselves, buying random products or investing in shares or things like that without much knowledge of the market and without much knowledge of, how to allocate assets and do all the stuff that a really proper, well-qualified financial advisor or planner would run through. So I guess it's kind of, it sucks that, the industry has gotten to a stage where it's kind of put off so many people that they, especially younger people, they wouldn't even consider getting a financial, advisor, because actually the right kind of financial advisor can just have such a huge impact. And because of compounding returns, like doing it and getting the things right in your 20s is just such a powerful, thing to start you on the right course in your financial life.
Rory, this is something that I think is so topical and so important for us to figure out. How do we align incentives with our clients? Like, is it something that we can do? So tell me a little bit more. So now you've had this unfortunate experience, which I guess is part of life's lessons of
school fees. I call it school fees, basically.
You paid some school fees, and it sounds like it wasn't the right person, which led to the wrong product linked to you. Like, was that a correct assumption?
Yeah, like this was a guy that I was based in Singapore at the time, and this was like a guy that was referred to me by a friend, and he was this. My friend was like really impressed with him, and my friend, by the way, worked in technology, super smart guy, and he said, "Yeah, this guy's great. You should go and you need to like figure out what to do with your money that you're just piling up in your bank account. That's dumb. Like, you should go do something with that." And I'm like, "Yeah, this is, I should go do something with it." And I sat down with this guy, and he was this like friendly Scottish guy, and he had all sorts of stories about, how he was, independently wealthy, and he was just doing this just, out of the goodness of his heart because he just wanted other people to like benefits. And thinking back, it was all just BS, basically, like, I don't know if he understood that it was BS. I don't know if it was malicious or if it was his just like well-intentioned sales pitch to kind of just get people to be comfortable with his level of expertise and his intentions. I honestly don't know. I can't get in his head. But he was either malicious, or he was just not very smart and just was selling products and pushing products that were just awful. And I think, clearly, once I started asking the right questions, clearly he wasn't the right person. Clearly this was not somebody that actually understood what it was that he was selling, or understood it and was like, "Oh, well, I'm just going to make some money anyways and just get some commission out of this." But really, at the end of the day, looking back, he got a big commission payment up front when he got me to sign up to that monthly premium. And then at some point, like in the 3 years, in the 5-year period, I think 3 years in, he convinced me over a beer to top it up, to increase the monthly premium. And that part I look back at quite sourly because he then took another little commission check out of that, and none of that was to my benefit. I had to surrender out of that and burn 25% of that money. So yeah, clearly in hindsight, this was not the right person.
Do you think your acceptance of what happened, or your at least the emotional response around it, if you, let's say you paid an hourly fee for this and you ended up with the same product, do you think your emotional responses would have been similar, or do you think that would have been different, purely based because the payment actually then came from you, even though the outcome was maybe the same?
Yeah. So I think that's a super interesting question, because that gets to the heart of what I'm trying to figure out and I guess explore with this DoshGuide mission that I'm on, which is, the fee model, or let's call it the incentives. How much impact does that have on the behavior of an industry? And it's a question, I don't know exactly the answer, but I'm very curious about that question, because my sort of thesis or my sort of hunch is that it has a big impact. Incentives drive human behavior. I think there's a Charlie Munger quote that says, "Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome." And he's always talked about just how he's been throughout his career. Charlie Munger, by the way, is vice president of Berkshire Hathaway. So, one of the most, I think it's like the 7th largest company in the world, and super successful. And he's the right-hand man of Warren Buffett. And he always talks obsessively about incentives and how everything he's looked at and all the systems and setting up the company to operate in the right way is all about incentives. And I think people often believe that they are above the incentives of the system that they're in, that, I know that there's I often talk to advisors and they go, I know that in theory there is a sort of conflict of interest there, because, if I've got a bunch of assets and I'm charging AUM, I'm going to be less inclined or biased towards you removing those assets from the portfolio. I'm not going to necessarily, I'm biased against that, and I think people trust their ability to rise above that too much, just in general, and not just with advisors, it's with everybody, because I think individual advisors would always go, yes, I always do the right thing for my clients, but in aggregate, look where the industry is and look what the levels of trust are in the financial advisor. Financial advisor is like a tainted term. It just sits on the same sort of trust level as like a used car salesman. There's some studies that actually show that, and that's so unfortunate. That's an awful place for a profession to be, and I guess the level of trust you can debate, but I think there's an issue there. There's a big trust issue, and my thesis is that a big part of that is that in aggregate, incentives drive behavior. And if an industry's incentives are, to push, to pay a commission for selling product, that is what the industry will do, regardless of what's good for the client. And we've seen this time and time again. I think the commission question is answered. I think, a lot of the regulatory stuff in other countries and in South Africa is moving away from that. So that is answered. There's no really debate about that. But the next step is on AUM. I think AUM actually works super well for wealthy clients. I think it aligns incentives. If you've got a bunch of liquid assets, it actually aligns incentives, and the advisor's kind of incentivized to grow that. So I think there is some alignment. And I think AUM is going to stick around for decades. I don't think that industry is under any risk. I think it's a great model for certain profiles of clients. But I think younger clients are just en masse just rejecting that model. These clients are kind of used to subscriptions and platforms and ratings and reviews. They don't book a hotel unless they've seen 100 reviews that there's this kind of hotel. And so, none of it really falls into the category of the way that the sort of, I guess, traditional approach to financial advice works. And so I think, that profile of clients is asking, questions and kind of moving in a different direction.
Before we get to the matching of potential clients to advisors and how that makes sense, I want to talk about setting ourselves up to almost withstand the temptation of incentive. Like, what are the rules that you're seeing advisors or practices follow that set them up to be potentially more aligned, or at least a little bit more immune against this temptation? Because, as you rightly say, when you look at the incentives, you can almost predict and you can guess what will follow.
Sure.
Yet, a lot of the times, I speak to a lot of young financial planners, even within our business, we've had this discussion. The employer is also incentivized to make sure that you don't ask too uncomfortable questions. And I don't want to say brainwash, that's maybe too far, but, get you so passionate around what you're delivering that in your financial advisor's defense, like, maybe he wasn't aware of the impact. So, tell me, what are those rules that you think can set us up to be a little bit more immune against incentives, or how do we prohibit this?
Yeah. And I think it's a great point. Like, just the first part of that question, just around that, like, sometimes the advisors and the companies kind of, drinking the Kool-Aid is the term that comes in. Like, there was a great documentary recently about what's that? The company that does OxyContin, and how they had these sales meetings where they basically tell the salespeople, like, this is this OxyContin is this miraculous drug that's going to change pain management, and you're going to help people, you're going to help millions of people. And they 100% would go to the doctors with that belief very much in their heads. Obviously, in hindsight, we've now all learned that was just an off. They basically started the sort of OxyContin sort of opiate crisis in America and were literally responsible for the deaths of millions of people. But I think that speaks to the point of, like, a lot of those sales reps in that show, they weren't necessarily aware. I think they started becoming aware later on in the episodes, but they weren't necessarily aware at the beginning. They were, like, honestly believing what the sales managers and what the product managers were telling them, And I think it's the same for the sort of the financial side of things, or the financial advice industry.
Yeah, those cigarette salesmen come to mind, the Marlboro Man.
Exactly.
Yes, like, there might be some benefit, but there's also dire consequences of the advice or the sales that you've made.
And if you've overdone it and you've kind of taken something and pushed it into, opiates are probably really useful for certain people to help with medication, but not for, like, everybody, and because of greed and because of, that family, the Sackler family, started, just going crazy and pushing it to everybody. And it was just super irresponsible. And I think that's a great metaphor for, financial product. There's certain things that are not meant for everybody, and there's a certain level of responsibility to set up the incentives for your salespeople, I guess, or your frontline sort of customer-facing people, that removes as much kind of, skewed incentives or tries to discourage bad behavior. And I'm not saying, I don't think that you can ever have a perfect system, right? I don't think that you might always get a bad actors, but I think that the incentives set up in the right way can set it up that most people operate in the right way, rather than the opposite, which is most people operating against the interests of clients, which is not what you want. So I think, like, to your original part of your question is, like, what do we think about, like, how do we put, the right incentives in place? I mean, if you go to, our website and you look at what we're up to, we're very much like a fee-based approach, so there's a complete disconnection from products. There's a complete disconnection from the sale or the push of product or the collecting of assets. Like, we've got 3 tiers, a low complexity tier, mid complexity, and high complexity. And depending on the complexity of the clients, if they're starting out, they're low complexity. If they've got a family, maybe they're mid complexity. If they're a bit more high net worth, they're high complexity. That's a very rough description of what it is. But you slot into one of those 3 tiers and you pay a monthly subscription just like you pay your DSTV or your personal trainer, and you get access to an advisor, a CFP qualified advisor, as much or as little as you need. Like obviously at the beginning, it might be quite a lot, many meetings a month, and then it will sort of get into more of a maintenance thing. But then if something in life happens, a year or like a divorce or starting a family or moving overseas, then that will ramp up again and you might, use them more frequently. But they're sort of on call and there's an ongoing annual engagement with them after that first initial kind of building out a financial plan and all the good stuff that I think everybody listening to your podcast would know about, like holistic, great sort of financial advice. But I think that the difference with, fee-based, and we're like a subcategory of fee-based, which is specifically a subscription-based approach, is that you are removing any of that conflict of interest, and you are removing any of the sort of the push towards behaving not in the interest of your clients, or the pull, let's say, towards behaving not in the interest of your client. And so that actually, I think, is super important, and it's something that we're obviously, aiming. Our goal is to accelerate the adoption of fee-based in South Africa, but we don't think that not all fee are born equal. Like you get lots of different categories under the category of fee-based. You get like an hourly, where you just charge an hourly ad hoc rate. You would get like project-based. And then you get subscription-based. Those, I'd say, are roughly the 3 categories. And, for whatever reason, in the category of fee-based financial advisors, the hourly is never really taken off at scale, right? You do have people who charge hourly, but it's never really been a big thing. And the same thing with like project-based, where you charge, 10,000 or 20,000 or 5,000 for a financial plan once off, and then it's done. That is not really, I don't think, necessarily scaled. I don't think it's a huge part of the industry, but I still think that fee-based is important. And so the experiment here is like, let's try out a subscription-based approach and see if that's something that will get us closer to product market fit and get us closer to meeting that need of, that particular profile of client who is really looking for, unbiased, unconflicted advice. So that's sort of the approach with DoshGuide.
I like how you've simplified and just given someone a different option, right? Because when you were looking for a financial planner, yes, they might have been around, but the ones that you had in mind was, okay, I engage, I see what's to offer, and then I need to judge, is this a good fit or not? I want to flip it around a bit to say, how do we protect the advisors and the financial planners from being abused by clients that might, opt in for subscription and just try and milk as much as possible? Is that happening? Or, is it just my irrational fear of giving away too much? Because, oftentimes when we speak to someone that may be working for commission, he has to, or she has to speak to 5 or 6 clients and potentially, one out of them take a product. So I understand the mathematics behind that. Yet if you have a subscription model where I think essentially where the communication is unlimited, how difficult is it to set those boundaries to say, well, actually, this is not, we need to go and revisit that. Is this a conversation that's come up before?
Sure, yeah, and it's a good question that definitely would be a concern from advisors that are looking to diversify into this category, right? So I think like the magic number in terms of like painting a picture of what it looks like, a subscription-based advisor business model. What does that look like? Because I think that would answer your question. And the magic number seems to be about 100, like 100 clients, right? That's an ideal amount. I mean, some could do a little bit more, some could do less. If you have really amazing platforms and systems, and there's some great examples out of the US, by the way, people should check out Facet Wealth. They're a great example of this model really like just absolutely exploding. That business is, I think they got $100 million of funding last year, just absolutely growing hugely, double their client base in 2022. So that's a good, the subscription-based approach is not like, I didn't invent it. Like it's not like I've come up with this approach. It's the thesis, and there are proof points and comparables in other markets where actually people are really responding very well and adopting it, that particular, especially that profile of client, right? And so where was I going on this? Remind me, Libby.
Hey, we were talking about how do we create the framework, at least for people not to abuse the system. So now you're paying a subscription. I'm thinking my Netflix subscription, I can watch as much as possible.
Right,
and
with
yes,
the
maybe it
advisors,
has a bit of a drain on the servers and how much they need to pay for storage. But other than that, I'm not taking up a professional's time. And so I'm trying to figure out how do we create those boundaries, I guess, between advisors and clients.
Exactly. And so, so I guess, painting the picture of what the model looks like is getting towards answering that question, which is, you have 100 clients, let's say, for argument's sake, might be more, might be less. But in that group of clients, there's always going to be like a portion of clients who are starting out, right? Of the 100 clients, say there will be 20 or 30, I'm just making up numbers here, that will be at that early stage, which is the process is top loaded or front loaded. You are going to do more work, and there's been much more touch points early on with the engagement of with the client, rather than like 6 months or a year in, where it becomes more of a maintenance thing. And then there'll be a portion of clients, like the sort of the midsection of clients, I guess, the torso, let's call it, who are more shifted towards a maintenance level, let's say 6 months, a year in, and then there'll be a portion that are just very high maintenance. They've gotten so comfortable, and you've gotten them to a stage that they are just so on top of it, and it's just like maybe you only see them twice a year, but when things do happen, maybe you need to see them a bit more. So I think the model works because you have that distribution of clients, a percentage that will be top loaded or front loaded, a percentage that will be more mid, sort of torso, just a regular amount of maintenance and touch points, and then a percentage that will be very low touch and actually really easy. And so it sort of spreads itself out. And the other thing that we see with our clients is that they don't want to speak to us like every month. That's not what they're not interested. Of course, when they're first engaging and you're trying to figure them out and get the foundation in place, there's going to be it behooves the advisor to kind of get the right information and get a good foundational amount of information, and that's going to take some time. But certainly, I don't think any of the clients, actually very few of them, want to be constantly every week, every month talking to the advisor. In fact, they are very happy to shift into, maybe touching base every month or every 2 months. And actually, some of them will move to, only speaking to the advisor twice a year.
It strikes me that some of this is not too dissimilar of the assets under management model, where you still have this cross-subsidization to say some of the clients that are using more are paying, or the clients that use less are paying for the ones that use more, and hopefully over time it balances out. I do want to challenge the concern that I have around selling time. Like, how do you then position as an advisor the value offering? You're paying the subscription, but if it's not linked to time, what else is there?
Yeah, exactly. I think, and that's definitely trying to figure out, how to continuously add value is a key thing. I'd say the one thing just to mention even before going into that is that, the subscription also is flexible. It's not like somebody is signed up for life. If they don't feel they're getting value, they stop paying, So actually there is, there is a bit of I guess one of the challenges of operating on a subscription basis is you have to figure out a way where you are continuously adding value and the client feels like, they are continuously getting value and they don't feel bad about that, 1,000 Rand a month or whatever they spend on the subscription. And so that is something that, each advisor on our platform has to sort of figure out, and people have different approaches. But there are some sort of themes, and I think one of the themes is I like to think about the financial needs pyramid. If you Google financial needs pyramid, you've got the hierarchy of needs, and there's loads of different versions, but the one that sort of sticks out of my head is that at the bottom of that pyramid of needs for clients in terms of their financial needs is like what you'd call maybe like the fundamentals, like wealth protection is like the description there. And it's stuff that is pretty fundamental, like setting a budget and like being accountable to that budget, building an emergency fund, managing your debt, not getting too crazy on the credit cards and not getting too deep into debt where it gets unmanageable. Even just figuring out your relationship with money, like why is it that I behave in certain ways with money? A lot of that sort of foundational, basic sort of stuff is sort of at the bottom of that pyramid. And it's also, you could also define that as sort of coaching, because there's an accountability portion to it. It's like you need to be checking in because you're trying to change people's behavior. It's like the human side of financial planning, right? And then the next up, that's the kind of the base. And I think that if you don't have that right, honestly, you're kind of in trouble. Like if you as a client haven't got some of that basic stuff right, you're a little bit in trouble. And the second part is like the sort of planning, right? Where it's like now you're looking at products, you're looking at like risk mitigation and those related products. You're looking at investment products, retirement products, and then you might be purchasing and deciding what to buy. And then at the top of the pyramid, you've got the more advanced stuff like the optimizing, like tax stuff and estate planning and maybe some trusts, and it gets a bit more complicated, but it's not it's not as necessary as the foundational stuff at the bottom. And I think, like, to answer your question, like a good advisor, because they are touching all those points of the pyramid, there's like a continuous level of value that they can provide, because a lot of advisors that are not incentivized in the right way, let's say, will focus on the middle part of the pyramid without going into the basics, because that's how they get paid. That's how they, feed their family and, pay their mortgage and stuff. They have to like keep doing the middle part, which is selling financial products and moving financial products and collecting assets. And unfortunately, even though they may want to, they don't get to spend time on the more foundational stuff, which is like the financial coaching stuff and the making sure you're building up an emergency fund. And in 3 months' time, checking in, like, how are we doing on that emergency fund? Okay, why is it not growing at the rate that it should be? Let's look at that. Let's reassess that. So there's a great like accountability around it. And it's not just, I always say, like, building a financial plan is great, but like basically what people often do is they take the financial plan, they go, cool, and then they don't look at it for about 2 years. But, when you have that continuous engagement, you're referring back to that plan, and you're setting up goals, and there's an accountability around it and a coaching element of it that moves people towards not just having a great plan, but executing against that plan. And honestly, I think that's where the magic happens. And that's where the value can be created, where somebody will go, man, I don't mind spending that money every month, because I can see like that I didn't just have a great plan, but I've executed against that plan. And I've got a meeting with Louis in like 6 months, and he's going to like give me hell if not really, but I'm not going to feel great if I'm not hitting some of the targets that we've set out. I've not changed some of the behavior, and I'm not building up my emergency fund. So I think that's a good way to think about how to continuously add value.
I love that. And it's like aligning the incentives, but also having someone that's got your back. I remember a few years ago, there was they're still operating a US-based business called LearnVest. And
Sure.
They had this analogy of kind of a personal trainer. You'd pay a monthly subscription. They had boot camps that you can join in on, like fitness classes for your finance, group sessions. And they really had to get to scale. And unfortunately, they were then bought over, I think, by one of the product providers. And so we're seeing that over and over again. Businesses that have figured out how to scale advice end up being acquired by product houses to just link it back to a product ultimately.
Right. Yeah.
Because oftentimes these businesses don't generate enough revenue to cover their expenses. Like, do you think that with smaller practices, this is a sustainable model? Or is it something where, hey, we're trying to figure out what's a balance to actually serve these clients? Because I'm wondering, for most financial planners, is it profitable to service clients in this phase? Or, I'm throwing ideas around, or will this be serviced by robo-advisors or the banks in digital channels? I'd love to hear your take. I know that was a very vague question, but share with me what you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that there is a value to be had from approaching it this way. Maybe if you could just, because I feel that there's something good there, but if you could just rephrase just so I can, because there's definitely a good answer in there. I just want to make sure I'm getting it.
Yeah, if we can talk about the sustainability of this model, right? We're seeing businesses being acquired by product houses because I feel like a lot of them are not sustainable, and they fix it by saying, now we have a product linked to it, right? Which goes back to your initial problem around incentives. So is there something that we can fix? Is this sustainable enough, or will time tell?
Right. And I guess the question is also around, like, does it even make sense for advisors to be trying to service this segment of the market is where I was kind of going also. So I guess, we believe yes. We believe that there is an ability to service. And actually, I think that, if the comparable is that company in the US called Facet Wealth, that, people believe in that model so much that they've been given $165 million to grow, right? And they've doubled their client base to 12,000 clients in the last year. So clearly, and it's the same, it is a model, it's basically low cost in US dollar terms, low cost subscription-based access to a CFP. That's basically the business model. But they also have a platform, which helps people to sort of engage with clients, or helps the advisors to scale up. So I think the platform part is important and helps an advisor to, instead of just doing 100, because it's more efficient, they can do 150 or 200 clients, right? And so there is, proof points of this model definitely working, but it's a very different approach. And I think if you're very much in an AUM mindset, it's quite difficult to get your head around, well, how is this going to be sustainable? But I would say, even just do the simple calculations. Let's say you can, even at like 500 Rand a month, let's say, if you've got 100 clients or like 150 clients, that's 75,000 Rand a month. So if you can get a planner, a relatively junior planner, to do a great job with 100 to 150 clients, you can basically get 75,000 Rand a month out of that. And if you have 10 of those, do the maths, the challenge obviously will be able to scale that out and to have pods of advisors, and then your clients would graduate from 500 to 700 to 900 to 1,000, and they would move up to more senior level advisors who are maybe charging 1,500 a month. And you can do the maths on that also, 1,500 a month, 100 clients, 150 clients. Yeah, it can be actually super profitable and very sustainable. And, the great thing from the advisors that work on our platform is that because they've been freed up from having to push products and collect assets, they're doing the work, that whole pyramid, they're doing the work that they were set out to do, the reason why they went into this profession in the first place, to help their clients. And they don't feel this need anymore to kind of push products. And so they actually really, really love it. And it is sustainable.
I love how passionate you are about this. And I agree with you. There definitely is a space. It's interesting to see it change and evolve. And I'm wondering, the advisors that are on your panel and listed, do they then refer out to a product specialist to implement the product, or do they implement themselves? And if they do, from an insurance perspective, what happens to the commission? Is it then okay for them to then earn that commission?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I actually meant to answer that earlier on, because I wanted to make sure that people understood this. So 100%, our advisors can advise on products. They can, and that's if a product's needed. Sometimes a client has a great product and there's no need to change it, And so, and with them, they have no compulsion to change the product if they think it's a good fit and it's low, the costs are low, and it's a good, reputable provider. They're going to say, great, use that product, no problem. Which is quite unique, I'm sure you'd understand, in the financial advisor space. But if let's, and there's a big assumption, I think it's it's a problem in the industry that there's always an assumption that we need a product. Sometimes, especially younger clients, they don't need a product. They've got a work pension scheme. They don't need life insurance at this stage. They've got no dependents. It's fine. Just keep putting into, maybe increase the contributions to your pension scheme. Let's get a bit of an emergency fund set up. You said you want to invest in some shares. We can dabble in that. Let's figure out what is an appropriate level to do that. We can help you to do that. But it not necessarily needing to sell like a whole new product, right? And I think, but to your question, if a product is needed, then 100%, our advisors can do help with product, and they can help with the implementation if that's what you want. And they only point people towards zero commission products. So any of the products that they would select, it has to be either a zero commission product, like either a DIY product the client would sign up themselves, and they just point them in that direction, or if it is a platform that the advisor uses, it has to have an option where you zero the commission out. There can be no commission. That's pretty much the most important rule on our platform. And then also that's just not on the investment, on the risk side of things. People don't seem to know this, but especially consumers, but a load of the platforms, you can zero out the commission on the risk products, so life insurance, disability cover. And often when you zero out the commission, you get so far we've seen about a 20% saving for the client. So that's another thing that we tell our clients, like, yes, this costs you 800 Rand a month or 1,000 Rand a month, but your life insurance for your family, we're going to save you 20, 30, we've seen up to sort of 40, 50% saving. And so you're already starting to make some of that money back just because we're helping you to make the right decisions.
Rory, I want to add that what we see in our business, especially with older clients, is because often the insurance was never reduced, they end up in a position where they're so overinsured. So we actually cancel more insurance than what we sell. And, it's really a function of the clients in the practice. And how we've tried to set...
points towards, it's such a great example, because I think it's just such a great example of the wrong incentives. The people who sold that insurance product, they should be checking in and reducing that insurance product. But why would they? They've already sold, they've earned the commission, and they've moved on, and this is, I think, a perfect example where it's not necessarily outwardly malicious, but it's just not incentivized to behave in the right way, and that's to the detriment of clients.
Yeah, just like you're not incentivized to cancel cell phone insurance contracts if you're not, you might not even have that cell phone. We had a client that were paying 3 cell phone contracts, and she had 1 cell phone. So, okay, well, what's these other 2? No, she can't remember what they're for.
I don't know why I have those. Yeah,
the same thing happens, and I think if you follow the trail back. For me, a big part of this is remunerating advisors at least the bulk of their income from a salary perspective. Then you're trying to do that. What you've said is, hey, let's try and mix that to the actual end advisor, being paid by the client. Or you could do it through the firm where they then facilitate it, and figuring out that balance. As we wrap up this conversation, for advisors that are interested to learn a little bit more, or clients that want to find out, where should they head?
Yeah, sure. They can just email me, Rory at DoshGuide.co. So it's RORY at DoshGuide, DoshGuide.co. Or just go to our website, DoshGuide.co, and get in touch with me and have a chat. I love chatting to financial advisors and hearing, especially the ones that are sort of interested in diversifying outside of their current business model, and looking at diversifying into a fee-based approach. Specifically, a subscription fee-based approach is what we support. And so the way to think about us is if you are an advisor, and by the way, if you have an existing AUM business, all power to you. I actually have, contrary to maybe some of the sentiments from this talk now, I have nothing against AUM and AUM advisors. I think it's a great model. I think it works great for certain types of clients. And so, but if you are interested, in diversifying and not basically putting all your eggs in the AUM basket, and having some eggs at least in the sort of subscription-based or fee-based basket, then our platform is there to support you, connect you with a network of like-minded advisors who are also trying to make that transition. It's not easy. It's a difficult transition to make. It requires, lots of business retooling, process retooling, the way you engage with clients, from sales calls to ongoing engagement, everything shifts, right? And it's not an easy thing, but that's what we're here to do. We're here to support those advisors who want to look at making that transition and sort of capture a younger market, I guess, and have access to a younger market who are kind of thinking in this way. Then that's what we're here to do, and ultimately also provide you with a pipeline of leads, subscription-based lead that you can start chatting to.
Rory, I want to echo what you said around rethinking your value, retooling. And we saw that when we started charging for our financial plans. Now we had to defend the value that we're offering, not, defending the end product, but, often clients would say, okay, but what do I actually get? And so we had to really figure out, how do you convey the service into something that's valuable and that someone can equate to say, okay, I'm willing to pay this fee for what I can expect to get. And I wish you all the best with building this platform. I really hope that in the future we can look back and say, great, this is a growing part. Because for us to service the growing population and a part of our population that might not have access to financial advisors, I really believe that this might be a sustainable model. And I want to thank you for taking the risk and building this. I wish you all the best.
Awesome, Lee. Well, great chatting to you. Thanks so much for all the great questions and for doing what you do.